Hi, my name is Anna Northcutt. I've completed the National Bible Bee Summer Study 9 times, and I've advanced to the National Competition 8. And in this video, I'm going to be attempting to answer the question, what is cross-reference context, and do I really need to study it? Okay, bear with me for a moment while I take an example out of the 2023 Discovery Journal. In Unit 5, Lesson 3, we have our weekly Who is Jesus Christ section, and that basically focuses on studying the Explore passage for that unit in context. Acts 18:27-28 is the Explore memory passage for that unit, and it talks about someone who was really good at convincing the Jews that Jesus was the Christ, or Messiah, depending on your Bible translation. However, we don't know who that person was, and the Discovery Journal asks us to read Acts 18:24-28, and that's when we learn that the person being referred to in our memory passage was Apollos, a Jew born at Alexandria, etc., etc. Even though that example was a memory passage as well as a cross-reference, hopefully it still demonstrated how important knowing the context for a cross-reference can be. But now imagine doing that for every single cross-reference on the official list. It's doable, but it's a lot of work, and it can seem very intimidating. In my personal opinion, you do not need to study cross-reference context in order to qualify for the National Bible Bee competition, unless it's context that the Discovery Journal specifically had you look up, like the example I just included. That's actually probably extremely testable material. By and large, though,
Don't qualify because you didn't know that. That's not your only problem. You probably didn't know other stuff.
of course, I'm just slightly biased because I don't think I've ever gotten around to studying cross-reference context before the qualifying test, so from now on, I'm going to let you hear from people who studied at least some cross-reference context. Sorry, Reed, looks like you and I are just gonna have to sit this one out.
I think generally, if the context will give you a better idea of what the passage is trying to say, then study it.
Well, I know that I missed at least one cross-reference context question on the QT last year, so I would say that it is obviously not as important as like CR content, but yeah, I think you should definitely study it at least somewhat.
I would try to memorize the context of especially narratives because I feel like they're asked a lot. So I think there was a question last year on the qualifying test that was like how old Abraham was, and it wasn't in the cross-reference that I remember, but it was before or after it.
This is from Dylan, and he said, I would know just enough to understand the reference. So for instance, I wouldn't really look at much context at all for Proverbs, except maybe the proverb coming before and after. With verses in the history books, I would try to learn enough context so as to understand the setting it was in and any events that occurred right before or after. Most of my context studying was just reading the verse in context and hoping it would stick, but I would only use Quizlet on some of the more relevant pieces of context, like if a parable happens right before a cross-reference, then that would be more relevant than, say, knowing what the first part of a psalm a cross-reference is taken from about. A lot of it comes down to thinking like a test writer and what sorts of questions would be asked.
We usually like read through the surrounding context like one time, once or twice, and take some notes on them and review those.
When I would read them, I would read like a little ahead of it and a little bit after it. I didn't go like chapters ahead and chapters after.
What I usually do is I just look over the context. Usually it's the day of the test because I'm a procrastinator. But I'll just like read over each cross-reference and then kind of glance over the context of all of those when I'm looking over them. And it works actually.
So if you're working to do as good as possible and you have the time, that's good to work on. So I like to work on it a little bit. But then if you work on that and completely leave out studying your Hebrew or Greek words, then that's not a good idea.
And that was the general consensus among everyone I interviewed. Study it last or not at all. And I know in this video, I mostly included clips from people who did study cross-reference context and were saying you should study cross-reference context. But even with those, I got a pretty universal response of,
It wasn't a priority, and I don't think it has to be a priority.
I I hope this video helped you understand cross-reference context just a little bit better, and as the test draws closer, may the Lord bless you with wisdom on exactly what you need to study and maybe even cram last minute. But before we end, I just want to share an encouraging word from Kezia Ballard.
I'll just encourage anyone to do Bible Bee and just tell them that they won't regret it. It's time well spent. It's invaluable time in God's Word.